14 inches of vertical space. You stare at a specific knot in the oak plank 2 inches from your nose. A drop of greasy condensation gathers on the wood, swells, and falls into your eye. It tastes of salt and ammonia. You do not wipe it away. It takes too much energy to lift an arm in the stagnant heat. It is week 8. The wind died 11 days ago. Outside, the Atlantic Ocean is a flat, blinding mirror. The massive canvas sails hang from the yards like dead weight. The galleon drifts. Down here in the lower deck, there is only the heat. It settles over the cramped hammocks like a wet wool blanket. 100 men lie in the dark, breathing shallowly, trying to conserve moisture. The only sound is the rhythmic, agonizing creak of dry timber rubbing against dry timber as the hull rolls in the heavy, lifeless swells. Up on the quarterdeck, the captain sits under a canvas awning. He dips a goose quill into a glass inkwell. He checks the water casks logged in his ledger against the estimated days to the nearest trade winds. He draws a thin black line through a number and writes a smaller one. The daily water ration is reduced to half a pint. He does not look down on the main deck when he makes this decision. He sprinkles sand on the wet ink to dry it. The bosun blows a single flat note on his whistle. It is time to replace the chafing gear on the mainmast shrouds. The sun has baked the tar out of the hemp. You climb 60 feet up the rigging. The ropes are stiff and brittle. The dried salt embedded in the fibers acts like crushed glass. As you pull the heavy lines tight, the grit grinds the calluses off your palms. A bead of blood wells up under your fingernail, runs down your knuckle, and drops into the ocean. The bosun stands below, holding a piece of chalk. He makes a small mark on a slate when the job is done. Days blur into a long, uninterrupted haze of assigned tasks. The horror of the voyage is not found in sudden violence, but in the crushing monotony of maintaining a rotting machine. The decks must be scrubbed with sandstone blocks. The iron rings must be greased. The daily routine is a mechanism designed to extract labor until the asset fails. At noon, the cook brings a wooden bucket to the gun deck. Inside are ship's biscuits, baked in port 6 months ago. You take one and tap it against the bronze barrel of a cannon. 3 pale weevils fall out onto the deck. You put the biscuit in your mouth and bite down. A dull crack echoes in your skull. You spit a hard white fragment into your palm. It is half of a molar. The lack of fresh food is quietly taking the body apart. Inside the joints, the biological glue that holds tissue to bone is dissolving. You look at your left forearm. There is a pale, jagged line where a rigging knife slipped 4 years ago. The skin around the old scar is red and soft. While you watch, the center of the scar simply pulls apart. A thin line of fresh blood runs down your arm from a wound that healed in another decade. The body is cannibalizing itself to survive the afternoon. Water seeps into the hull even when the ocean is calm. The heavy oak planks shrink in the baking heat, and the sea pushes through the dried seams. It collects in the lowest trench of the hold, mixing with rat droppings and spilled vinegar. The officer of the watch checks a brass pocket watch. He points his cane at you and 3 others. Down to the elm tree pumps. You descend the ladders and wade into the stagnant water. It reaches your knees. It smells of sulfur and wet rot. You grasp the wooden brake lever, up and down. The friction tears the remaining blisters on your hands. You pump for exactly 4 hours. The officer watches the sand fall through a glass timer. When the last grain drops, he taps the wooden rail. The shift is over. He records the completion of the task in the logbook. The wind eventually returns. The coastline materializes as a thin gray line on the horizon. The galleon drops its iron anchor at the stone quays of the port. The surviving crew lines up on the main deck. They are emaciated, covered in open sores, missing teeth. The imperial purser sets up a small folding table by the gangplank. He opens a thick leather ledger bound in brass. He calls your name. You step forward. He reads down a column of numbers in a flat monotone. He deducts the cost of a canvas shirt from the slop chest. He deducts the surgeon's fee for a bandage applied 3 months ago. He deducts the cost of the daily rations of hardtack and stagnant water. He reaches into a heavy canvas bag. He places 2 silver coins on the wooden table. Next, he says. You pick up the coins, you walk down the wooden ramp and step onto the cobblestones. The purser turns a page in the ledger. The doldrums. A 16th century galleon is a machine that requires wind to function. When the wind dies, the machine becomes a wooden vault baking in the equatorial sun. It has been 3 weeks since the sails caught a breeze. The canvas hangs from the yards, heavy with accumulated salt. The ship drifts in a dead, flat ocean.
The daily routine does not stop for the weather. At 5 in the morning, the bosun's mate walks the gun deck. He does not shout. He taps a wooden belaying pin against the bronze barrels of the cannons. The metallic ring is enough to wake the men. You roll out of the canvas hammock. Your knees pop. There is a dull, persistent ache deep in the joints of your hips. You stand up in the dark and walk up the ladder to the main deck. The morning task is unlaying old rope. The bosun hands out lengths of condemned hemp rigging. You sit on the deck planks, cross-legged, and pick the stiff fibers apart with an iron marlin spike. The goal is to separate the strands to make oakum. The carpenters will later pound this loose hemp into the seams of the hull with hot pitch to slow the creeping leaks. You pick at the tarred rope. The air is still. A fly buzzes around the eye of a sailor sitting across from you. The man does not blink. He just keeps picking at the rope. The friction rubs the top layer of skin off the sides of your index fingers. The bosun walks past, counting the piles of oakum. He records the output on a slate with a piece of chalk. If a man produces less than his daily quota, his water ration is halved. It is not malice, it is an equation. The ledger dictates that a man who does not produce work does not require hydration. By noon, the heat settles over the deck like a physical weight. The ship's cook rings an iron bell. Dinner! The purser stands by the mainmast with his ledger and a set of brass scales. The crew lines up. The crown dictates exact measurements for naval rations down to the ounce. The purser places a brass weight on one side of the scale. He picks up a piece of salted pork from a barrel and places it on the other. The scale balances. He hands the meat to a sailor. It is your turn. He drops a block of pork onto the brass pan. It is gray, coated with a thick crust of crystallized salt. He checks a list, makes a small mark with a quill pen, and pushes the meat towards you. He does not look at your face. You take the pork back to your mess group. You sit on the deck between 2 cannons. You use the heavy wooden handle of your rigging knife to hammer the meat against the iron carriage of the gun, trying to fracture the salt crust. It shatters into sharp, jagged pieces. You put a piece in your mouth. You chew. The immediate salt draws the saliva from your tongue. The texture is like chewing on pumice stone.
The sailor next to you, a rigger named Thomas, stops chewing. He spits his piece of pork into his dirty palm. Along with the gray meat, there is a tooth. The root is black. Thomas stares at the tooth for a long time. He touches his jaw. His gums are swollen, purple and soft, like rotting fruit. Scurvy does not announce itself with a sudden collapse. It creeps into the jaw lines and the joints during the quiet afternoons. Without fresh food, the body stops maintaining itself. The connective tissue breaks down. Thomas puts the tooth in his pocket and goes back to chewing his pork on the other side of his mouth. No one says anything. The afternoon is assigned to slushing the masts. The wood must be protected from splitting in the dry heat. You carry a bucket of rancid animal fat up the shrouds. The smell of the grease is flat and sour. You reach the main top, 60 feet above the deck. You dip your bare hands into the bucket and smear the fat onto the mast. You look down. The deck is a narrow sliver of brown wood floating in a vast blue mirror. The ocean does not look dangerous today. It looks indifferent. It stretches to the horizon in every direction, empty. You rub the grease into the wood. Your hands are slick. You grip the ropes tightly, the rough fibers pressing into the raw patches on your fingers. You work in silence for 3 hours. At sunset, the heat breaks slightly. The sky turns a pale, bruised purple. The officer of the watch checks a brass pocket watch. He nods to the boatswain, who strikes a bell. The evening watch begins. You climb down the rigging. Your legs feel heavy. The ache in your hips has spread to your lower back. The biological glue holding your bones together is failing. The ship carries crates of lemons in the officers' stores, locked behind a heavy oak door near the stern. They are reserved for the captain's table. You know they are there. Everyone knows. You walk to the scuttlebutt to get your evening water ration. The wooden barrel is guarded by a Marine with a musket. The purser stands next to him with a tin cup. He dips the cup into the barrel. The water is yellow and smells faintly of vinegar, which was added in port to kill the algae. He hands you the cup. You drink it in one swallow. It coats the back of your throat with slime. The purser makes another mark in his ledger. You go below deck. The hammocks are strung up in the dark. You lie down in the 14-inch space assigned to you. The man next to you breathes with a wet, rattling sound in his chest. The oak planks groan as the ship shifts slightly in the dead water. You close your eyes. You wait for the morning when the boatswain will tap the belaying pin against the bronze cannon.
The ship leaks. It is an unavoidable fact of timber and physics. The sun bakes the upper decks, shrinking the oak planks. The pitch cracks. Far below the waterline, the ocean presses against the hull with a slow, steady weight. In the middle of the night, you hear it, a rhythmic, hollow dripping echoing deep in the hold. The oakum you picked apart yesterday is already failing. At 4 in the morning, the watch changes. The officer of the deck lowers a brass sounding rod down a narrow shaft. He pulls it up and checks the wet mark against the light of a lantern. 4 feet of water in the bilges. He nods to the boatswain's mate. The order is not shouted, it is spoken in a tired, flat voice. Pump ship. You walk to the main mast. The elm tree pump is a massive vertical wooden tube. The iron brake levers stick out like broken branches. You take your position. The wood of the handle is polished smooth from decades of friction. You stand in the dark, the black water seeping over your bare feet. The smell rising from the pump shaft is dense, a stagnant pocket of methane, fermenting grain, and drowned rats. You push the heavy lever down. The man across from you pulls it up. A thick column of black water spits out onto the main deck and drains sluggishly through the scupper holes into the sea. You pump, up and down. The muscles in your lower back seize. The skin on your palms, already raw from the tarred rigging, begins to peel. You leave smears of blood on the smooth elm wood. You do not stop because the Marine standing near the hatch holds a loaded musket. He leans against the bulkhead, half asleep. The officer watches a glass sand timer. 2 hours pass. The last grain of sand drops. The officer taps the wooden rail with his cane. The shift is over. He logs the completion of the task in his book. You wipe your hands on your canvas trousers and walk back to your hammock.
The water will be back tomorrow. On Thursday, Thomas does not get out of his hammock. The bloody flux, dysentery. It breeds in the wooden water cask stored deep in the unventilated hold. The water turns into a thick biological soup. Thomas groans, clutching his stomach. His skin is gray and slick with cold sweat. He needs to relieve himself. There are no latrines below deck. The naval regulations dictate that he must go to the head, a crude wooden grating at the very front of the ship, suspended directly over the ocean. He rolls out of the canvas and crawls up the ladder. He walks across the upper deck, hunched over, holding his stomach. The ship rolls gently in a new, slight breeze. Thomas reaches the bow. He drops his trousers and sits on the wet grating. He's too weak to grip the safety ropes.
A larger swell hits the bow. The ship dips. A crest of green water washes over the grating. When the foam clears, the grating is empty. A lookout in the foremast calls out. The officer on the quarterdeck stops pacing. He walks to the wooden rail and looks down at the wake trailing behind the ship. He does not shout for a rescue boat. It would take a mile to turn the heavy galleon around, and they are finally catching a favorable wind. He turns away from the rail. He walks to the binnacle, opens the ship's log, and picks up a pen. He writes, "Thomas Miller, seaman, washed overboard. Wages forfeit to the Crown." The ship sails on. The space in the hammock line is filled by a man who was sleeping on the deck. Discipline on a galleon is just another clerical duty. It is Tuesday noon. A boy named William is caught taking a single hardtack biscuit from the officer's pantry. He was hungry. The crew is mustered on the main deck. The captain steps out of his cabin. He wears a clean wool coat. He holds a piece of parchment. He reads the naval article regarding theft of imperial stores. His voice is unhurried. He is fulfilling a legal requirement set by the Admiralty in Madrid. William is tied by his wrists to the wooden grating of the mast. The bosun steps forward holding the cat-o'-nine-tails. He does not look angry. He looks like a man assigned to scrub a deck or splice a rope. He swings the whip. The leather cracks against William's pale back. Thin red lines appear. William screams. The bosun adjusts his footing and swings again. He delivers 12 lashes. The back is a mess of broken skin and welling blood. The surgeon walks over carrying a wooden bucket. He throws a pint of raw brine over the cuts. It's a cheap, standard procedure to prevent rot. The salt hits the open nerves. William's eyes roll back and his knees give out. He hangs limply from the ropes. 2 sailors step forward, cut the ropes, and drag him below. The captain signs his name in the punishment log. The crew is dismissed. A boy with a bucket of seawater and a brush scrubs the blood off the deck planks so the officers do not slip on it later. The routine resumes. You look up at the rigging. The sails need trimming. You walk to the shrouds and begin to climb. The ship is dying. It's a slow, structural death that began the day the oak trees were felled in the royal forests. Salt water and damp heat break down the fibers of the hull. Down in the lowest hold, below the waterline, it is completely dark. A carpenter kneels in the bilge water holding a lantern close to a heavy structural rib. The yellow light catches a patch of white, spongy fungus growing on the oak. Dry rot. It eats the cellulose, turning solid timber into brittle powder. The carpenter takes an iron chisel and drives it into the wood. It sinks deep with a soft, sickening crunch. He pulls it out. A handful of pulpy wood falls into the black water. He makes a chalk mark on the timber. He will have to cut it out and sister a new piece of green wood next to it, working in a space barely 3 feet high, breathing methane. It is not an emergency. It is just another entry in the maintenance log. The rot invites the ship worms, Pteridonavalis. They are bivalve mollusks that bore into the submerged hull. You cannot see them from the inside, but in the quiet hours of the middle watch, when the men are trying to sleep, you can hear them, a faint collective rasping sound echoing through the planks. Thousands of tiny shells slowly chewing through the bottom of the ship, creating honeycombs in the wood. Above the waterline, other parasites thrive. Lice breed in the damp canvas hammocks and the seams of unwashed woolen shirts. There is no fresh water to wash clothes. Every Sunday, the men sit on the upper deck picking lice from their collars and cracking them between dirty thumbnails. It is a quiet communal activity, a way to pass the afternoon. The rats are bolder. They do not hide in the dark. They run across the floorboards in broad daylight. They nest in the coiled mooring lines and the sail lockers. They eat the remaining hardtack. They gnaw on the leather boots of sleeping men. Sometimes a man wakes up to find a rat chewing on the hard, calloused skin of his heel. He kicks it away, turns over, and tries to go back to sleep. The ship's cats died of scurvy 2 months ago. The rats own the lower decks. Month 5. The water in the casks is almost gone. What is left is a dark, foul-smelling sludge. The purser measures it out by the tablespoon. The scurvy has advanced. Men are losing their sight in the dark. Night blindness, the lack of vitamin A, shuts down the retinas. When the sun sets, half the crew becomes completely useless, feeling their way along the ropes with trembling, bleeding hands. The officer of the watch assigns the night-blind men to the pump brakes. They do not need to see to push a wooden handle up and down. They stand in the dark, chained by duty to the pump, weeping from the stinging bilge gas, their eyes open and blind. The ocean turns a shallow, milky green. Seaweed drifts past the hull. A gull lands on the mainyard. Landfall.
There is no cheering. There is no sudden burst of energy. The men simply stare at the gray smudge on the horizon with hollow, sunken eyes. The boatswain taps the belaying pin. The anchor cable must be readied. The galleon sails slowly into the harbor of a colonial port. The water here is brown with mud and sewage. The ship drops its heavy iron anchor. The chain rattles through the hawse pipe. The crossing is over. The harbor is loud. Church bells ring. Merchants shout from the stone quays. Small boats row out to the ship, carrying port officials and customs inspectors in clean linen shirts. They climb aboard, holding scented handkerchiefs to their noses to block the stench of the crew. The end of the crossing has been severely broken. The men are ordered to line up on the main deck. They stand in their rags, barefoot, skin mottled with purple bruises, jaws swollen. The royal purser sets up his folding table. He opens the brass-bound ledger. It contains the exact financial value of every man's labor over the last 6 months. He calls a name. A sailor steps forward. The purser reads the deductions in a flat, bored voice. The cost of a woolen blanket, the cost of a replacement rigging knife, the medical fee for a bucket of salt water poured on a whipped back, the cost of the rotten pork and the green water. The purser subtracts the debts from the wages. He reaches into a small wooden box. He pulls out 2 silver reals. He slides them across the table. The sailor looks at the coins. He has lost 3 teeth. His left leg is swollen from an ulcer. He picks up the silver. He does not say anything. There is nothing to say. He walks to the gangplank and climbs down to the stone pier. The ground does not move. It feels solid, strange, and hard. He walks past a tavern. A recruiter stands by the door, wearing a decent coat. The recruiter watches the sailor limp past. He knows the silver will be gone in 2 days. He knows the man has nowhere to go. The sea has broken him for the land. The recruiter takes a fresh silver coin from his pocket and rolls it across his knuckles. He will wait. Back on the galleon, the hatches are opened, the merchants begin to unload the cargo, the carpenters begin cutting out the rotten wood, the pump still runs, spilling black water into the harbor, the machine is being reset. You stand on the cobblestones. Gravity is wrong. The earth does not roll or pitch. Your inner ear, tuned to the rhythm of the Atlantic for half a year, sends panic signals to your brain. You stumble forward. A local merchant carrying a basket of onions steps around you, annoyed at the obstruction. You lean your shoulder against a damp brick wall. It is covered in a thin layer of green moss. It feels rough and cold against your cheek. It does not creak.
You look at the palm of your hand. 2 silver reels. They're stained with black tarnish from the purser's wooden box. You walk toward the market square. The muscles in your legs tremble. They are used to bracing against a 40-degree deck incline, not walking on a flat, unmoving plane. There is a stall roasting pork over an open iron brazier. The smell of hot grease and charred meat fills the street. Your stomach cramps. You haven't eaten fresh meat in 20 weeks. You hand the vendor one of the coins. He squints at it, rubs it on his apron, and hands you a piece of meat on a wooden skewer. You take a bite. The meat is soft and rich. Your stomach, shrunken and conditioned only to digest calcified salt beef and stale water, rejects the fat almost immediately. You lean over the cobblestones and throw up in the gutter. A stray dog walks over and eats the piece of pork you dropped. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand. Your gums begin to bleed again from the exertion. Back at the docks, the galleon sits heavy in the brown water. Stevedores are swarming over her sides like ants. They operate the cargo winches, hauling massive wooden crates up from the lower holds. The air around the ship smells of sweet molasses, damp tobacco, and the underlying permanent stench of the bilge. On the quarterdeck, the captain sits at a table with the harbor master. They are drinking Madeira wine from small crystal glasses. A clerk stands next to them, meticulously weighing a canvas bag of cloves on a brass scale. He uses a pair of iron tweezers to add a single clove to the pan, balancing the weight perfectly. He dips a quill in ink and records the weight down to the fraction of an ounce. The accuracy of the spice trade is paramount. The empire accounts for every leaf and every gram of silver. The death of Thomas Miller, recorded 3 pages earlier in the same book, occupies less ink than the inventory of the pepper barrels. You find a place to sit near the seawall, out of the way of the passing carts. You roll up the leg of your canvas trousers. Your shins are covered in brown, scaly patches. The joint of your left knee is swollen to the size of a melon, the skin tight and shiny. The scurvy does not vanish just because your feet touch dirt. The biological glue inside your joints is still gone. Rebuilding the dissolved collagen requires weeks of rest and fresh citrus. You check your pocket. You have 1 silver coin left. A room in a boarding house costs $1/4 of a coin per night. A basket of limes costs another. The math is simple, and it does not resolve in your favor.
The sun begins to set over the harbor. The tall, intricate shadows of the galleon's bare masts stretch across the water, creeping up the brick walls of the customs house. The docks grow quiet as the stevedores finish their shift. Up on the ship, the royal purser finishes his tally. He closes the thick leather cover of the ledger. He presses down on the brass clasp. It snaps shut with a dry, sharp click. He puts the book into a leather satchel, fastens the buckles, and walks toward the gangplank. The voyage is officially concluded. The books are balanced. You sit on the stone wall. The tide comes in, pushing a piece of rotting driftwood against the pilings. It taps against the stone. You close your eyes and listen to the water. The royal purser walks away from the docks, his heavy leather boots clicking against the dry cobblestones. The noise of the harbor fades behind him. He carries the leather satchel over his shoulder. He stops in front of a massive stone building, the Casa de Contratación, the House of Trade. The heavy oak doors are open. He walks inside. The air in the vestibule does not smell of the ocean or rotting timber. It smells of binding glue, dry dust, and old parchment. A senior clerk sits behind a tall, sloped wooden desk, sorting a stack of cargo manifests. The purser opens his satchel and places the brass-bound ledger on the wood. The clerk does not ask about the crossing. He does not ask about the weather or the state of the hull. He opens the ledger directly to the final page. His eyes scan the right-hand column. He checks the gross tonnage of the cargo. He verifies the total amount of silver dispersed for the crew's wages. He dips a goose quill into a shallow glass inkwell and writes his initials at the bottom of the page in sharp black strokes. He closes the book and hands it to a boy standing nearby. The boy carries the ledger down a long, narrow corridor illuminated by a single oil lamp. The walls are lined with oak shelves reaching up to the vaulted ceiling. Thousands of identical leather books sit in the gloom. Decades of voyages, hundreds of ships. The boy finds a gap on a shelf marked with the current year. He pushes the ledger into the empty slot. It slides in with a soft scrape of leather against wood. Inside that book is the complete record of the last 6 months. The suffocating heat of the doldrums, the tearing of the oakum, the raw salt poured into open lacerations, the dissolved collagen and the black bilge water, the dead men washed over the bow. All of it has been compressed, distilled, and converted into rows of neat black numbers. A deduction of 3 reals for a lost iron bucket, a deduction of 12 reals for salted pork. The boy blows out the lamp and locks the archive door. Down at the waterfront, a thick gray fog moves in from the ocean. It creeps over the stone quays and covers the lower half of the galleon. The ship sits motionless in the mud, looking like a rotting wooden ribcage. With the cargo holds empty and the galley fires extinguished, the rats begin to migrate. They crawl out of the hawse pipes and move along the thick hemp mooring lines, leaving the damp hull and scurrying toward the dry grain warehouses lining the pier. You are still sitting by the seawall. The fog settles on your coarse canvas shirt, making it heavy and damp. Your swollen knee throbs with a dull, rhythmic pulse that matches the sound of the dirty harbor water lapping against the stone pilings. You look down at your hand. You hold the single silver coin. The metal is cold against your calluses. A tavern door opens across the street. The faint sound of a fiddle and the smell of spilled ale drift into the cold air. The door swings shut, cutting off the noise. The wind shifts, blowing from the east. It brings the sharp, stinging smell of the open ocean back into the harbor. You close your eyes.